Hi guys, I'm Shmee. Hello to you. Welcome back to the channel where today it's time for an update on my new daily driver, the BMW M5. Now, of course, this car is a long-term loaner from BMW M, but we've already been putting it through its paces since collection day at the BMW Welt in Munich. In fact, that day, that video has 900,000 views, nearly 1 million views, which I think just shows how much interest there is in BMW's new super saloon. So we've been getting to know it, 3,000 kilometers of driving already. We took it up to the N24 immediately, drove a lap of the Nordschleife. Of course, it's done some blasts on the Autobahn. I'll take it out on the Autobahn today. And it's even been down to Italy and back on a road trip. So I've got to know it fairly well already. Today we'll take it out, talk a bit more about my experiences so far with the new M5. This is actually the first time that I've had 3 cars here in the garage in Frankfurt at once, and it's proving to be quite chaotic, dotting them in and out of storage, but the M5 is currently borrowing one of my neighbour's spaces very briefly. The 675 LT Spider is in my second space. Believe it or not, next month, this car is going to be 2 years old. We've done so much with it in that time, it still feels like just yesterday that I picked it up, but quite a few of you have been asking me to do something with it in the near future, so watch this space for that. And also, we're joined by the 911 GT3, as always, in my original space. But today is all about the M5, and this is the first time I've ever had full usage of a saloon car. Not just any saloon car, a 600 horsepower, 4.4 litre twin turbocharged super saloon. But I've owned hatchbacks, sports cars, convertibles, supercars, but never a 4-door saloon. I've even had, the FF. This is a similar kind of car to the FF, but it's the first time for me driving a car that's quite subtle and discreet when you look at it. The Donington grey paintwork, obviously not as bright as the cars you're more familiar with seeing me driving, but we've got a 500 odd litre boot, comfort for the rear passengers, ample power, and quietness and refinement. And that's one of the biggest things I've been getting familiar with driving this car. It doesn't scream, look at me. I mean, if you had an M Sport 520D, it would look just as shouty almost from the outside. But where this car's obviously secret lies is the engine, is the xDrive all-wheel drive system. But let's hop in and get ready to take this out on the roads. I don't want to borrow my neighbour's space any longer than we need to. But just feast your eyes over the interior. It is lovely. So, plenty of things to talk about, but let's go find an Autobahn first and get driving. You've probably heard me say this before, but one of my favourite things about Frankfurt is that although it's a very, very well-known city with a ginormous airport, the population is only 700,000 people, which relatively, for its fame, is quite small, which means you can get out of the city and onto some very nice de-restricted autobahns incredibly easily. It just takes a couple of minutes from where we are to be out on a fairly famous de-restricted stretch that runs incredibly straight for a long time just south. However, today, not only do we seem to have lots of roadworks, but we also seem to have a fair amount of traffic. So fingers crossed we'll get an opportunity to stretch slightly further ahead, and maybe in the future I'll do a full Autobahn run, because this car has the BMW M driver's package. So the standard M5, if you just order it with no extra spec, would have a top speed of 250 kilometers per hour, 155 miles per hour. That's the industry standard between the German manufacturers. With the M driver's package, that can raise up to 305 kilometers per hour, which is a top speed of 199 miles per hour. So that is in theory what this car has. I don't know how precise that is. Maybe we'll find out at some point in due course or in the future, but I'm certainly, well, I know it can go over 300 because it's been driven to that speed already, not necessarily on camera, but obviously to do so, tyres pumped up, make sure it's safe and not too congested, because you never know who is going to do what up in front of you. Cruising along though, while we're in this limited section with some roadworks, hopefully it opens up in a moment, the M1 and M2 buttons. Now you're probably familiar with these, and I'm not going to talk too much about the dynamics of the car because I've driven it on their test track in Miramas, I've driven it on Estoril, I've driven it at Valencia, and I've also driven it around the Nordschleife. I'm quite lucky with the M5 experiences that I've had, and there are more to come in the future as I just watch what that truck's doing. Anyway, M1 and M2 buttons. They've moved from being with the standard buttons on the wheel up to their own dedicated position, and being red, they're very sporty and bright, which I do really like. I think it just adds some character to the car. I have M2 set up as the, I guess, softer of the two sportier modes. I've configured them both how I would like them, and you can change so many things, even the view of the head-up display, you name it. So I have M2 set up with a Sport Plus powertrain and sport steering, comfort on the suspension still. So fun, just to get a bit of noise from the car without necessarily driving it particularly sporty. Then I have M1 set up, which you have to press twice because it goes into M dynamic mode to use four-wheel drive sport. So the four-wheel drive sportier setting on the M xDrive, which is all something I've explained before, and Sport Plus for both the powertrain and the steering and the head-up display and all of that kind of thing. And we're just getting now towards the de-restricted sign, which is going to be my cue to press the paddles on the back of the wheel, drop some gears, and get ready to put the foot down. We have the 8-speed automatic gearbox, we wait to the signs, and away we go. And this is where it picks up phenomenally quickly. I mean, we're already up from 100 to 180, 190 to 200. Fortunately, it's looking quite empty. 220, 230, 240, 250, and I'm gonna, no, we're good for the moment, 260, 270. You kind of get the point. That was 100 kilometers an hour to 270 kilometers an hour with relative ease, and that is where this car excels. That is where it's in its element. It does that in such a seamless, natural, comfortable manner. It goes about its propulsion down the road with very little drama. But I know when you take it to a track, it also puts this massive M smile on your face. And BMW haven't asked me to say this, by the way. This is my own opinion, because I'm used to driving sports cars, supercars, GT cars on the Autobahn quite quickly. In fact, last week, in the space of 36 hours, I drove 4 different cars over 300 kilometers an hour on the Autobahn, which just made me pinch myself for a moment. But fortunately, the roads are all completely empty and the cars are all capable of doing it. But this is where it does it, and it just goes along. You know, even now, cruising at 170, I know that's not that special if you're from Germany or familiar with these roads, but it's quiet, it's peaceful. The four-wheel drive system gives you that stability even in the sport mode, and it just goes about business in a way that other cars don't. For example, the E63S, the direct competitor that everyone's been asking me about versus this car, is much more boisterous, much shoutier, much snappier and barkier. There's, I don't know which is necessarily faster. I don't think there's probably too much in it. I mean, this car is rated officially at 600 horsepower. Unofficially, it seems from reports of people who've put them on dynos, it might be nearer 700. But obviously the manufacturer's numbers have to be based on dyno figures running on weaker fuel and in warmer climates. So obviously if you have cold temperatures and you're running on 102 RON fuel or something, the car is going to do its thing kind of effortlessly. But it's also got all the creature comforts, you know, your lane guidance where it will hold you in the lane. We have the adaptive cruise control, which you can't, you can use it. When you put it into MDM mode, it turns it off, but you can jump it up and down by 10 kph at a time, or however you want it. It can read the speed limit signs and actually lower itself, as it's just done, although it's holding us back because we're sitting behind some other traffic. But it does all of these kind of things just in such a neatly integrated manner, a smooth, easy way that is no stress or efforts to the driver. You just do your thing and the car whizzes along like it's no issue. Then we get back towards our beloved white signs with the black crosses through them, put the foot down and away you go again. In the M head-up display mode, you get a great visual representation for shift lights, which, to be honest, the actual M display itself is almost too big. It's, I think, the largest head-up display that's been used on a car, but it is very dominating. There's almost too much of it, too prominent, too present. I hope you can see that on the camera, but if not, I'll show you afterwards anyway. But it sounds cool, although this begs the artificial sound question. We talked a little bit about that, and the more familiar you get with it, the more you can kind of detect that sound comes from the footwell areas in front of you, from the speakers, as opposed to from the engine and exhaust behind. It does sound good outside. It's not the loudest thing. If it was your private car, you might want to put a new exhaust on it, but that's because of regulations. We actually asked BMW about this, and the answer is that this is effectively as loud as a manufacturer is allowed to make a car on the outside now. You can't legally do it. Legislation gets in the way and blocks everything from being possible in that respect. Let me use this as an opportunity to tell you something that I don't like so much. So right now the dashboard is telling us that the speed limit is 100 kilometers an hour, which it isn't. That is one of those speed limits that in Germany is only relevant from 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. and it is quite clearly not 10 p.m. to 6 a.m. but the car can't detect that. And that's something that bugs me slightly, because you have this feeling of guilt of, oh, am I speeding? But you're not, just the car is misinforming you. It goes both ways, because I think the cars can't be too intelligent in this regards, or at least not now. Maybe in the future they will, or maybe this information will be more satellite or data based rather than the cameras that are detecting and seeing everything. But it does look a little bit like it's not going to be clear today, unfortunately. I had hoped, given that this is the same stretch that I have driven the McLaren 324 down and the GTR 331 down, but today, not going to happen, sadly. Another very specific thing to this kind of driving environment that isn't perhaps relatable anywhere else. In Germany, well, firstly, the German drivers are brilliant at being aware of what's going on around them compared to anywhere else in the world, particularly seeing things from behind. If cars see a car coming from behind that is very low, very wide, and very aggressive, they tend to automatically just move out of the way. This car does not have that presence. If you see it coming up behind you, it could be any BMW, it could be any diesel saloon. You don't realise that it is a car capable of doing 300 kilometers per hour. People, genuinely, I notice, do not kind of move over or see you coming. It's maybe a politeness, courtesy thing they normally do when they see a supercar coming or a very low sports car, but this just doesn't stand out. Now that goes, again, both ways. Part of it is very nice to be driving in a car that's quite discreet. People don't necessarily recognise it, although saying that, it was spotted on the other side of the motorway already, which is quite crazy. But then it's a wolf in sheep's clothing, you know, it has that power, but doesn't necessarily say, hey, look at me, I'm crazy fast. And that's kind of cool, that sleeper element. Perhaps it's not so much me, but I am enjoying driving it, that's for sure. Here we go then, drop some gears, put the foot down, and away we go. The pickup is very, very smooth. I mean, I have to admit, I am a fan of the way turbocharged engines feel. I like the way power just keeps on coming and keeps on coming. And especially here, we're up to 260 on again, immediately 270. We're going to slow down as we get towards the traffic with the carbon ceramic brakes. Great feel. Obviously, it's a big, heavy car that we're driving here, but you do have a lot of stopping power, amazing stopping power, has to be said. And it feels very assured of itself when you do. And that, I've said it, is exactly what this car is. It is an amazing Autobahn cruiser. If only it had a touch more presence at the front end, a touch more aggression, maybe to the design of the splitter, to the base of the car, that just meant that people would see it slightly earlier. That's my only small gripe for this kind of driving. Otherwise, it's effectively perfect. It's connected, it's got a music system. The online entertainment, where it can bring up music from an online server, is epic. I love how you have that access. It's a subscription service that you can get 2 years up front and then pay for. It's really good, and let's face it, you do like listening to music while you're driving. Again, up to 250, just blasting on, and you feel like it's got so much power as it transforms that to momentum in the weight of the car. Oh, as the car's pull out in front of us, on the brakes here as we come in. No particular reason, but we do get to go up to the red line again. You know, every single shift is up at the red line. When it finds its momentum into the next gear, it's just such a good feeling. But we're back out of de-restricted areas now with an A380 flying overhead, which just looks absolutely ginormous. Off to Dubai, that one will be going. So, cruise mode, back into gentle, get it out of the M1, M2 options. We were driving an M2. Oh, I put it into M1, there we go, one press again. You go back into everything, completely normal, calm, gentle, gradual. Chilled out settings, turn on adaptive cruise control, turn on lane assistance, and Bob's your uncle, the car will do it all for you. Before we get too many comments about it, yes, I know that this car needs a clean. It has a lot of mess all over it, but I've not really been around too much to give it a wash, so it's been a bit unloved, and it's going to be time to clean that up again very shortly. It is also quite warm. It's currently showing 30.5, but it was 34 degrees a moment ago, which is why the air conditioning has been blowing quite strongly on us. However, let me just step out. Goodness me, it is very, very warm today. Actually, really quite ridiculously warm. But that's one thing I've actually noticed about the car. It takes a long time to cool down. When you park it up and turn the engine off, the cooling fans are running for ages after you park it up. So if it was somewhere a bit quieter than this, you'd be hearing those non-stop for a very long time. But it's just a super smart looking thing. That's a word I perhaps overused when I introduced the full spec of it to you in my follow-up video when we were at the N24. It's a very smart car. It goes about its purpose in a discreet way, but with a lot of style. Now, there are a lot more things that we have planned with this car. In fact, I think 4 spring to mind immediately. I'm going to be joining BMW at Le Mans 24 Hours, where the new M8 GTE car is going to be racing. I've been to Le Mans the last 3 years, and each time I've gone with the team that has ended up winning their relative class. So, fingers crossed on BMW making it 4 in a row, which would be quite epic. Let's see what happens. There are also rumours there might be a new car there, so fingers crossed on that one too. We will be able to stay tuned and see that if it arrives. And then I'm going to do a few things directly with BMW and BMW M in Munich that feature the M5. So we've talked about how this car is a long-term loaner. It's a car that I'm able to drive for the next couple of months. It's not technically mine, I don't own it, but I do get to use it whenever I want, drive it and make these videos. But other things I wanted to experience, this is one of the major benefits by having the long-term loan, is the opportunity to open more doors to create interesting content for you guys to experience as well. So with this car, for example, I'm going to take it to BMW's Driving Academy in Meisack near to Munich, where we can play more with the xDrive, put it into four-wheel drive Sport, and then experience two-wheel drive and maybe go and learn to drift it a little bit. That would be quite fun. Long wheelbase, lots of power. That's basically what it's for. We'll also go and visit BMW Individual, so the bespoke customization division, and maybe even do one or two touches on this car just for a bit of fun down the line too. And thirdly and finally, we're going to go and see the factory, the plant where this car was built. So as well as going to Le Mans, the things we've done so far, I'd say this is pretty awesome. I'm very excited for what's still to come with the M5, but so far the first 3,000 kilometers have gone really rather well. It's a car that I guess doesn't need too much introduction. It's not exactly the first generation of the M5, but it's incredibly comfortable. It's incredibly well equipped. It's a very, very nice thing to drive, especially here in Germany on the Autobahns. If we just step back in to get away from the noise of the traffic for a moment, I wanted to show you the head-up display, so allow me to do that. If we press M1 twice, we engage the right mode, and there it wakes up. I don't know if you can actually see that, but it woke up in a very cool fashion, and you can see quite how dominating that is, but the information that you get there as well up on the display. This whole display is all very smart. I really like the way they kept these chrome bezels, so although it's a digital screen, it still has a sense of analog nature to it by keeping those, retaining those on the design. All super smart. The nav system all works very well. Gesture control, I know it's a gimmick, but I love turning the music up, doing that. It's just super cool. It's just stupid because you have buttons here on the steering wheel, but it's fun to do anyway. All the configuration settings, parking. This car doesn't have the 360-degree parking cameras. I would have loved to have had those. Small thing, but I feel, you know, on a big car, you definitely want it. And it is a huge car, I didn't actually say that yet. But one thing I've noticed in a big way is if you try and get it through a narrow car park or through any narrow gaps, it feels, well, every bit as big as it is. It makes the McLaren almost feel small, which is kind of unusual. So it's been particularly awkward to park. Not gonna forgive it for that. If I have to pick a foible, it's that side of things. But other than that, everything's going pretty well. So I'll do another update down the line. Of course, you'll see the car visiting Le Mans. You'll see it at various other things with BMW in Munich as well. But so far, so good. As you can see, nice blaster on the Autobahn. Awesome thing to be driving. Maybe we'll even catch a VMAX run at some point too. But that is it for this time. Let me know what you'd like to hear about the car. Do ask questions in the comments down below, and we'll do our best to get back to you and give you some answers. But thank you very much for watching. As always, guys, appreciate your support. I'll see you again next time. Cheers.